correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the How We Roll Gaming podcast. It is good to have you back. Robert, Nick, how are you fellas doing?
Doing well.
I am doing good as well. Our group, I just pulled out my latest campaign with Legend of the Five Rings just last Saturday. So,
Very
from what
impressive.
I heard, people liked it. So, we'll keep going from there.
Yes, indeed. We absolutely did. And I have been kind of, in the back of my mind, rolling ideas for my character around, for things for him to do.
On top of that, ran part 1 of the finale of a long-running Star Wars campaign that we've been doing, Whisper Base.
Yes, you did.
And I designed you a campaign finale T-shirt for it.
I'm definitely going to purchase one.
Very well, sir. Very well.
I recommend those. That's an exclusive link to those players in that one. Exclusive to them, so that they know who the veterans are.
So even though I made a campaign shirt for my Star Wars Rebel Yell campaign, talking to Betsy last night, she had an awesome idea for a campaign shirt for Rebel Yell.
I saw the messages, but I didn't read all of them. But she had some cool ideas, but I didn't read the whole chat.
So the idea is, since it's about a touring rock band trying to make it big, but also doing jobs for the rebellion, make the campaign shirt the Many Bothans tour shirt and hold off on designing it until we've got a few more sessions under us, so that the tour locations are all of the planets and everything that you've all gone to.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, I love this. I love this.
Again, I only got the tail end of that, which he says he needs sleep.
Yes, because
which seems to be a thing that all of us are in need of.
The reason that came about is she messaged me in the chat for our sister podcast, Casual Nerdity, for the next episode of our Clone Watch series, where we're going over the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars animated series, that, Nick, you said you had walls of text in your notes that you've been making for the Mortis episodes. Yeah, Betsy's exact words were, I have a problem. I can't stop talking. And she's making walls of text again, like she did for the last arc.
I'm getting scared because I think we might be dueling walls of text, because I have a lot to say about this arc.
Look, Lauren and I will probably be sitting back and contributing every so often while you two have walls of text. This might end up having to be a 2-part episode of Casual Nerdity.
Honestly,
y'all can just play Duel of the Debates.
But honestly, if there was ever one that required a whole lot of discussion, it's the Mortis arc.
Yep.
It is dense and rife with theory crafting.
Yeah, dense for 3 episodes that didn't really get referenced again until Ahsoka.
And will probably be playing a big part in season 2 of Ahsoka.
Rest in peace, the original actor of Balin Skull. But his new actor, there's actually did a voice reveal, and he sounds very similar.
Right on. And right before we started...
interpretation, yeah.
Right before we started talking, right before we started recording, Nick, you and I were talking about how we're kind of nerding out because in August, the 2016 Toho Shin Godzilla is being released in theaters in the US in 4K.
A re-release in 4K.
And so, yeah, we'll be seeing... Man, we're going to be eating good at the movie theater over the next couple of months.
Oh, yeah, just in general, Godzilla fans, we've been eating very well these past year and a half. But it's like in general, this year is delicious.
Yes. Yes, it is. And unfortunately, we'll be heading headlong into Tron Legacy. But
I'm
with
pretty sure the only way I can get you to see that is if I pay for it and I sort of blindfold you and just drag you into it.
well,
Because I
see,
need to see it. I need to see it.
I kind of want to see it, but Jared Leto.
They got him for it?
Yes.
Yeah, he's the lead.
He's the lead in
But
Tron.
Nine Inch
Or, I'm
Nails.
sorry, not Tron Legacy, Tron Ares. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but Nine Inch Nails is doing the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, everything about it seems awesome, except Jared Leto.
There are instances where a good soundtrack still can't save a movie.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, Nick might end up dragging me to see it. If he does, I might let him use my Cinemark discount and all of that, just to repay the kindness.
It will give you points.
It will. But anyway, after that little bit of a downer, what say we get into some good stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
We were excited to join the lineup of great podcasts on the D20 Radio Network not too long ago.
But now we're not the newest show on the network anymore. Join us in welcoming We Fix Games to the network. Welcome.
Yes, welcome. And on We Fix Games, Laura and Jerica, your hosts, will dive deep into the story side of video games. What worked, what didn't, how they'd make it better. It's part thoughtful critique, part chaotic brainstorm, with plenty of laughs, hot takes, and a fair bit of cussing. So come for the plot holes and stay for the unhinged redesigns. And listen to We Fix Games wherever you find your podcasts.
Sounds really fun. But
Yeah,
also,
that sounds like something I'd listen to.
Welcome to the network, guys. We are glad to have you. And I really need to dive in and catch up on listening to it, because I was looking at some of the episode descriptions and I was like, I don't know these games, but this sounds like an interesting conversation.
Oh, I took a quick peek at it, and I definitely added them to my subscription. Let's get into our topic. Would you like to use our title?
Our title is Not Just Sidekicks, Making and Managing NPC Companions.
Yes, sir. Something that every campaign will have a bit of in some way or another.
Yep.
NPCs. They are just as important to being a GM as it is knowing the rules of the system you're running. We've gone through world building and having NPCs around to fill the streets, the stores, or bump into along the way helps the characters make this game worlds feel alive. But sometimes your player characters will either find, build, otherwise obtain an NPC that's not just a familiar face or a fearsome foe. Today we're talking about those NPCs that are part of the team, how they work, how they can be naturally integrated, even if not intentional, and managing them going forward.
Yep. We've all had that NPC that we meant to just be kind of, like a passing NPC, and let me throw a quirk their way to make the NPC fun for me to play for the players while they briefly encounter them, and the players fall in love with that NPC.
And they want to know everything about that NPC. They want to take that NPC with them, and they want it to stay.
They want it to become a supporting cast member.
And then now you have well, I put a quirk down. Guess I got to build a life now.
I have to build a character around this quirk. And
it's honestly is, as much as there's a lot of cliches in the RPG world, this is as I say, the adopted goblin.
Funny you mentioned that, since our D&D campaign did something similar.
We have an adopted hobgoblin.
But it's
Kurgadolf.
But it is the thing. It's like you never know when a character sort of vibes with the team and they want to bring them along, or it makes sense that they're given a vassal or a squire.
Or after the players have made their characters in session 0, you look at the skill set, you look at what the campaign is about, and you notice, okay, there's a void here. There's a role that it's not super important, but it needs to be filled. There's a support role that needs to be filled. For example, there is my Star Wars campaign, Rebel Yell, about the rock band.
Yeah.
Well, there's 5 players currently. Only 2 of them are actually members of the band on stage. The other are support staff. There's you as the mechanic and technician and pyro guy. There's Betsy as the manager, and there's Dan as the bouncer and security. So with only 2 actual musicians, a singer and a bass player, there's an astromech droid that fills in some of the instrumental tracks and does some light show stuff. That's kind of built in there to fill that empty hole that's in the campaign.
And that fits well with the genre. It's a Star Wars campaign. A quote-unquote buddy droid is acceptable as like a easy NPC to add in.
On the flip side of that, there's the NPC that unexpectedly becomes a group favorite. How many times have you put in that NPC that you expect to be a recurring NPC? They're going to be a supporting character throughout the whole thing, and they're just sort of there because the group doesn't really... They don't dislike that NPC, but they're not super invested in the NPC.
There's always a risk.
I haven't had that happen yet for me. Mine have been more the routes of I put someone in there, my players love them, and now I got to keep them around. I've had that happen at least twice, maybe more. But as far as an NPC that people don't fully care about, it can be around as a supporting cast. I don't think I've hit there yet, but I've definitely seen experiences in other ones.
I think I've had a few, but none that were like egregious enough to say that. But that is the risk.
And we ran into that in our Far Orbit Project campaign where we had a murder mystery that is now completed, ran through the first dozen or so sessions as a subplot, and we introduced kind of a red herring NPC that the way that we envisioned this character was she was going to be an NPC that the PCs loved, and she was just sort of there. She was going to be an NPC that the PCs loved, that hopefully the players loved, and she was going to turn out to be a red herring who was using the murders that were the mystery to commit a few of her own and make hers go kind of unnoticed or believed to be part of the larger murders and draw suspicion away from herself.
But going off of that same campaign, a side mission that, long story short, ended up at a sort of ballet studio, added in one of the more popular NPC characters.
Yes, and as someone who's in that campaign, I know who you're talking about, Nick, but it just proves your point, Daryl, that I have no idea who you're talking about.
Yeah, see, it was the mechanic.
Yeah.
The cute, plucky mechanic.
We spent some time on that.
Was she a Twi'lek?
No.
Oh. Then I don't remember her.
See?
But yeah,
I know Baz. I remember Baz.
That's usually where I would say, like, most often it's not the GMs that are making these characters. It's the players that sort of the GMs have to retroactively make them more character than not.
Right.
You can try to engineer one, but then you run the risk of the dreaded DM PC.
Yes.
Yeah.
And none of us have reached that. I find it a good way to just put them out there and get the players to choose is just have a one-time interaction and just see how they react. If they If they like them, cool, I can build on them. If not, it's all right. I didn't invest too much of a character build into this, and I can just shove them off to the side. Maybe they'll come in like one time in a blue moon, and I'm fine.
Yeah, and I've got notes about that. You do want to be conscious about not letting any of these recurring companion NPCs turn into a GMPC. They're there for support. They're there for flavor. They're not there to become the star of the show. They're Gunther to the Friends. They're Joyce Summers to Buffy and the Scoobies. They're Perry White to Clark Kent and Lois Lane. If your campaign were a TV show, they wouldn't be in the opening credits.
Yeah, you don't want to make.
Or if so, they're like they don't get a individual like scene of them with a name card. It's like in the opening credits, but like they don't show up with in the Friends fountain.
Well, and one of there's an example of a show turning one of these support NPCs into a regular, which lasted for maybe a season, and then they put them back into supporting PC slot, and that's Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Stuart was a recurring supporting character, and they wanted to lock Kevin Sussman in to be available, so they made Stuart a regular. And Stuart was great as a recurring character who owned the comic book store that they went to.
And appeared, but he wasn't.
And was friendly with them, so would sometimes appear outside of the comic store, but he had an NPC vibe, that he had this shtick that he was his business was barely getting by, he was unlucky in love, he was kind of a sad sack, and he was an NPC.
Yeah.
And then they promoted Kevin Sussman to a series regular, and they had to find reasons for Stuart to be in every episode. And that's where it was tough for them to do. They bumped him back down to recurring. And interestingly enough, he's going to be the focus of the next spin-off, but that's going to be a show that is built around the character.
Which makes more sense.
Rather than being a character that the audience vibed with as an NPC.
Yes.
I bring up Kurgadol is our D&D sort of character that fits this bill. He doesn't do a lot story-wise. He's more support in combat or funny comic relief.
Yeah, he's with my character because my character is the one who saved him initially, because he was an enemy first, but then afterwards I was like, my character's got it good, he wants to redeem himself and others, so he's like, maybe this guy can be good, come join the Hopeless Situation Warriors. And you're right, Kurgadol has a few lines here and there, but he's not a main fixture, and whenever he's in combat, his entire attack pattern is he throws pebbles, because we wanted to give him a weapon, so we were like,
enhanced.
So he's like, Daryl has the magic pebbles enhancement, so we had him do that. He got a really good roll on it, so now we've made that his character stick of he's the one that throws the magic pebbles.
Right.
He functions as a additional long range support, which helps in combat with either larger groups of enemies or like when we don't have our regular long range support player.
Similarly, and I give you a lot of credit for this, Robert, but in my Rebel Yell campaign, there's an NPC that was just background flavor in the dive bar that they were playing in session 0. And even though you're not part of the campaign, you had come by just to hang out. And I was like, here, play this NPC.
Sure.
Have some fun. Be the NPCs.
And partially
now,
because it was played by a player that we all like, but also you play that character in a fun way that's like we liked.
Yeah, he's basically your first roadie / heckler.
Yeah, and he's not even a roadie. He's a heckler, but he is Statler and Waldorf combined into one. that why do we always come here?
You're great, our greatest fan, but also our greatest critic.
And your greatest annoyance at times because it's like, oh, he's back again.
Well, he's that. He's sometimes our greatest fan, sometimes our greatest critic, all time annoyance.
But yeah, I give you full credit for Harley becoming an actual character.
Well, thank you.
And-
I had pleasure playing him, and if I ever come back, and not this time, but maybe in the future, I'll be glad to
yeah.
play him again.
Yeah, I'll
In
just
fact,
have to figure out how he found his way back to, well, I mean, just following the band to play. Because
well,
when they got off the wheel, they left him.
The beauty about a heckler and the comedic aspect of him, he can always find his way.
that's a great way, especially since you mentioned the sitcom era. And it's like, you don't have. Sometimes a character just appears. Like, one character that I never anticipated it would sort of exist in a, for lack of a better term, a cosmology of our games is Slim Shady the Merchant.
Yep, and now we've put him in most of our campaign worlds, and he even has a buddy now from D&D, the Undead
Yeah.
Horse.
He doesn't show up in the ones that just
Are
is completely
dead
tonally inappropriate for him. But yeah,
And all because for lack of a better term, I was like, I need a shadowy alleyway merchant for one game, and well, sometimes you just
and you
come up with a name.
Yeah, you just kept using the same name, and we kind of decided that he was the same person across
And
all of these because he started off just in Star Wars campaigns.
Yeah.
So it was not unrealistic for him, even if the campaigns weren't in the same continuity, for that character to be in all of the Star Wars campaigns.
And then eventually I was like, well, you're going down an alleyway, and then one of you made a joke of like, oh, is he down there? It's like, you know what, hey, why wouldn't he be down here?
Sure, he's
Yep.
down here.
And in a mechanical and playing sense, I know I'm always happy to see him because he usually has some good gear or goods that he might be willing to part with.
Exactly.
And again, it's like that sort of like, okay, if I need to either tempt them to lose money on like expensive gear or give them something that they might be useful later on without having a good way of giving it, like he's the merchant guy that you find in the alleyway that has a conveniently like a flickering light, be it a flickering lantern or a unscrewed bulb in the street lamp.
And it's a good NPC when someone gives you an actual mini of said NPC.
Yeah.
Yes, I found a mini that the pose and everything worked, and what we had never established what Star Wars species he was, because that's what the mini was. He's now a Duros.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he has it, Nick has to use him.
One thing that I do to try to avoid making one of these recurring companion NPCs a GMPC is I try to make them very limited and very specialized in what they can do. So if they're, for instance, a mechanic, they're competent, but they're not the greatest mechanic that there is. They're not as good as a PC mechanic would be. And that's pretty much all that they can do. They're no good in a fight. They're no good in a social situation. Nothing. They can me fix and make go.
Again, going back to the Kurgalol example, I just gave the bare minimum Hobgoblin stats. He just happens to be really lucky when he rolls with that slingshot.
Yes, and in my own Star Wars campaign that's now on hiatus now, I had the players had their own NPC. He was a Gamorrean named Grukkor. And per Gamorrean stereotype, he is only good in a fight. He has a really good axe, and one of our players is busy with live, so he hasn't shown up for the past few months for this, and he was their melee person. So Grukkor fit right in there as someone who can tank the hits and do the melee stuff while everyone's sitting in the back and shooting their guns. And other than that,
Like I remember, I remember Gretgor because like I believe you told me like I was there just to sort of observe and roll for NPCs, mostly enemy NPCs.
yeah,
It was like
for session 0, and I totally revealed that I had Gretgor on the ship because it's a prison ship, so sure, you can see Gamorrean there, and I left it
you
entirely up.
wanted him to die.
No, I left
Well,
it entirely up to the characters what they wanted to happen with this Gamorrean, and then they pulled him up, and they took him with them, and they loved the guy, and then I killed him off, and now they hate me.
And in some systems, the system itself might give you a little help in coming up with these NPCs. For instance, the Walking Dead system. As part of the built-in campaign setup of Walking Dead, you have a group of additional NPCs that are part of the PC's group of survivors. And you can create them from whole cloth, or there's a table. Robert loves him some tables. There's a table in the core rulebook that you can roll a d6, and it corresponds to a group of survivor NPCs. And when we did session 0 for my Walking Dead campaign, I had you guys roll on the table, and the group of NPCs with the setting that we were building and the history that we were just starting to build for the PCs as a group, I was able to look at those NPCs that they were like 2-sentence descriptions
Mm-hmm.
of them.
If at that.
Yeah, if that. There were 2-sentence descriptions, minor NPC stats, and I was able to look at those and say, aha, I have a lot to work with. So there's a politician. I was like, oh, well, given that they're going into a very politically fraught area, which is the basis of the campaign, there's a lot to work with here. Oh, another NPC is a soldier that is undyingly loyal to the politician. This will work too, because any one of the PCs that she sees as a threat to the politician, they're a threat to her too, and she's sizing them up. There's an older woman who, I don't remember if this was in the capsule description or if it's what we came up with fleshing everything out. She used to be the leader of the Haven that the characters had to leave.
I think, yeah.
I think we fleshed that out. We also fleshed out that she doesn't take any BS from the politician either. She's basically on the other side, like, no, I don't know.
I think the rivalry came from the capsule.
Yeah, the rivalry came from the capsule. But
like the flavoring came from us.
Yeah. And they're a great group of NPCs. And as you've gone on, you've bumped into other NPCs that I'm not saying that they will show up later, but I'm not saying that they won't.
Well, yeah, I mean, like my character in that Walking Dead one, just like in the Far Over one, adopted another child on top of BC child that he already has, since Betsy and I decided they're related, so he's taking care of the little girl, JJ, as well.
Well, so you're the Pedro Pascal of the group.
And I played him like that because he's a homemaker. So yeah, he's the Dale of the group.
There's also the family that you met as soon as you got into town when you were going through the restaurant.
Made him gumbo.
And there's others floating around that you haven't met yet, but you've crossed their paths.
Mm-hmm.
So he says cryptically,
similar to a system that allows you to sort of build in characters like this. We recently started the Fallout campaign that we're doing, and one of the perks is dog meat. It's where you get a dog. A player can just take that perk, and they will find a dog companion. There's stats for it, and you can customize the dog, obviously.
Yes, and when we did the one shot, I actually, either I did or you gave it to me. I actually took the dog meat talent, and I had a little dog. I had a little golden retriever, and we just took him with us.
Yeah, it's again, you can pick it up whenever. It's one of the earliest ones, but they can only one person in the group can pick it up. So it would be the group's dog, but it would be specifically one character's dog.
Yes.
You say that only one character can take that in the group, Nick, but what's the first rule of every RPG? The
You
rules are
listen
just
to-
guidelines.
Yep.
What if we want to have the Legion of Fallout pets? I just broke Nick.
Yeah, I want a mutated mole as my pet.
I mean, this.
We all want pets, Nick.
Damn it! I have to look at those rules, but you're not entirely wrong. There's ways to tame animals.
Yeah, and even in my new Legacy of the Five Rings campaign, there's actually what's called a passion in the book that does give you an animal companion, and I think two people chose it. I mean, one has a fox, and I think another has a hawk. I think you're the one with the hawk.
I got the hawk.
Yep.
You didn't want a snake, Nick?
I don't think it was in there.
It wasn't in there.
And now he sounds crestfallen. It wasn't in there.
Birds are good too. I mean, they eat snakes, so.
And it fits the character because hawks can be messengers, and my character is a courier.
Yep.
But Nick more wants to play snakes than be a snake.
Well, it's a good thing you can't play a Naga in this one.
A what?
Forget he said anything. He said nothing. Forget it.
Sir? But yeah, there's plenty of systems that have like built-in mechanics for NPCs to be brought in as even D&D. There's the Knight class. It can let you have a squire. There's specific rules in the Star Wars campaign to have you have a Padawan or learner under you.
My apprentice.
Do it.
Do it. Yeah, do it.
But mainly the factor is like in the cases of like mechanically wise, that's where it's a conversation between the player and the GM rather than the group adopting a character into the party.
And now another way that you can keep that character from becoming a GMPC is let the players decide what this companion NPC is doing.
Exactly.
That's sort of how I've handled roughly Kurgadol with you all. Back to that example.
And back in my example, Brooker would always be there, but unless they brought him up, I would just say, "Oh, him? He's stuffing his face with food over there."
Oh yeah.
Similar to how I use, like if there's a combat encounter that you guys are handily dealing with, it's like unless it's funny that Kurgadol strikes the final blow, which is sometimes very funny.
It was hilarious. He killed a ghost with a pebble.
It can indeed be funny for the
plucky
sidekick
to get the final blow. But usually, like unless it's like it's a big combat encounter, it's like I don't say like, and here's Kurgadol's roll initiative. If he's around, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Kurgadol could do something." It's like usually at the very end, and that is usually a funny thing if he gets a really high roll.
Yeah, usually I'm the one that rolls his initiative, and he just is somewhere on my card, and I just roll for him when I remember, oh yeah, he's in here too.
Usually at the funniest bit, where it's like, it just sort of happens that way.
And we love him for it.
And so what other tricks do you have up your sleeve? I know that Nick will also occasionally we keep going back to Star Wars, but in some of our Star Wars games, like in the Clone Wars game, when there would be a lot of NPC clone troopers, even if they weren't specifically tied to our PCs, he would hand me the clone trooper NPC card and say, "Here, you're rolling for the NPCs."
That's more in the case of what I'd say, like, it's a subclass of the sidekick, of the large scale or just minion roles. Basically, the idea is like, these are the grunts. They're below a sidekick and they don't have really a name. but they're part of the scene.
I mentioned, one of the things that I do when putting together NPCs. I try to make them specialized and not crazy powerful. When I want them for a powerful NPC, that's when I'm talking about named and or specialized adversaries. But that's a whole nother episode that we've talked
Yeah,
about doing.
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, new one.
What do you guys do when you're making your companion NPCs? How do you prevent them from becoming kind of like we were talking about with rewards last week, an I win button, but still make them interesting and the players like having them around?
What
I
I've
think I
done
could.
first. Yeah,
I'll
you can
let you
start,
go
Nick.
first. I'll start first because mainly it's what we sort of been hinting at with both, like what we described with what you described as like me handing over a minion level card for large scale battles of minions, and what we described about Kurgadol. I gave you a basic bare bones hobgoblin, goblin, no fluff or anything, a stat block. We modified it by what weapon we gave him, and that's about it. And sometimes that's all it requires. Like, take a stat block of an average NPC, and then be like, okay, what if the end players gave him a great sword instead of a knife? Well,
Yes.
it could be as simple as that.
Yeah, it could be
And
as
then it's
simple.
like it say that, as you mentioned, like what if they need a healer? Pull up like a generic druid or generic priest of a religion in a D&D campaign, and just sort of put him there. It's like he's squishy. He probably will have at least some sort of melee weapon, but his main thing is like he's keeping the party up. He's
His
not,
main thing is he's hanging in the back, yelling, "Not in the face, not in the face," and
but
keeping the party up
in no way is he as good as a player character would be,
because he doesn't advance.
because he doesn't advance, or if he does advance, it's slower than a player could ever do.
Exactly.
But it's still like, okay, we just recognize that we need someone to keep the players up because this encounter is going to be rough, if just in case.
And you can, in a situation like that, it can even be you don't have that NPC there from the beginning. Like, let's say using D&D as an example, as they're going through the dungeon, the mission, whatever it is that they're doing, they encounter that NPC when they first really start to need them.
He was part of a previous part of the previous party for them, or the advanced guard that he's the last survivor of, and he's like, advanced to survive. I still have some spell slots able to keep you guys up, provides health potions, and rejuvenates them and joins them for the next leg.
And once that's done, like,
My,
thank
my
you for helping
monastery
me.
requires
Fare thee well,
monastery requires me.
travelers.
I'm back to my comic store, says Stuart the cleric.
Honestly, that brings back to that really. There's the really great Dungeons and Dragons movie, On Among Thieves, where there is a quote unquote DMMC, but they use it correctly, and they're like, and I'm leaving now.
I showed up, I got you to the important part, I got you to this MacGuffin, and I'm gone.
Yep, and they played it up, and they even had him come back at the ending to be like, "Oh, I've apprehended the villain."
Oh,
After the
they
heroes
even
defeated them.
played it up where it's like, oh, is he going to go around that rock? No, he's going to just climb over that rock.
Yep.
Because sometimes and we could probably discuss that, bring up more about that type of character when we do talk. Like, there is a benefit to DMs PCs, but they need to be used sparingly, very
Yes.
sparingly.
Definitely not reoccurring and with the group all the time.
But I will say, like, we could probably do an episode about proper uses of DM PCs in the future, because there's, as much as it has a more horror stories than glory stories related to them, there's a time and a place and a proper way to use them, but it's definitely requires nuance.
Yeah, it requires nuance and awareness on the game master's part.
It requires nuance, awareness, and restraint. Oh, wait, we're about to wander back into a Spanish Inquisition bit.
Well, no one ever expects it.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, the NPCs have their place, and we could discuss that in another longer explanation of that. But the main factor for a sidekick or player companion is that they need to complement either a player's playstyle or fill a niche that the group has. But
Yes.
more often than not, if it's a group sidekick, it's better that they sort of find them interesting. If it's an individual character, then that's usually more a mechanic function.
Yes, and I definitely agree with that. Because what I do with my NPCs is some of them I won't even stat out because I'm not going to use them that way. I just make them part or a mechanic of the story. For example, in the Cyberpunk one that I'm running, I have my fixer Marcos, and then my news reporter. I think I named him Max. But basically, they're not there to actually roll any dice or stat out anything. They're there as people you might run into in the city, or your quest givers, or the one that gives you the rewards. So they reoccur in the story, but they have a part in the story that doesn't take away from the NPCs. In fact, they're more the people that either talk to or reward your characters once they're done with whatever quest or gig they're on.
They're more narrative tools than they are companions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Marcus, I'm never going to stat out Marcus. He's your fixer, quest giver, reward giver person. And then another thing we've done with NPCs, especially when we stat them out, is I've done this in my campaign, and Nick and I did this in Legacy of the Force. We'll give you a companion NPC for a while, might even have them do some cool stuff, but because we're building on it, as well as with story bits, that they're going to do a 180 and become your villain later. We did this with Allegria in Legacy of the Force. She was with you guys for a while. She had the hilarious beats everybody with chairs and stools, only to have her turn around and become that Act 1 big bad that you had to face later.
I still don't think Betsy's over that.
Sometimes you do too good of a job making the players like those NPCs, and
we made them pretty cool.
when the heel turn happens, you have the
It's
players riot.
It's a stab for, but that's how we know we made it work.
Yes, and we'll have plenty more where that came from. It's Nick's times to shine in that corner right now.
I'm trying to think of what any other little things that I do there. Something else that I will do to try to help with player buy-in of these companion NPCs is if I'm introducing them, if they're not just a character that an NPC that the characters pick up along the way,
Yeah.
I try to bake in a connection to at least one of the characters.
Yeah.
You know,
And backstory here really helps in that regards, as long as you get player permission about it.
And honestly, like this, if I had to say there's only one bad example of it, it's like, don't make the character seem too useful. That's everyone with this, like, say that you like are going into an adventure, it's like, oh, you've run into this guy and he's just loaded with potions. I got all these types of potions. Like, everyone's gonna say that that's a trap.
Yeah, come into my shop. I've got all you need.
Everyone's gonna be immediately like, no.
Or I found what I've liked in at least Your Walking Dead, Daryl, especially with how they made it. They made the NPCs, the people in the group, but they also both didn't describe them a lot, which allows us as players to flesh out their personalities, maybe their story a little bit, along with
how
you.
we feel about them.
And they
it's
go
like
ahead.
it's a more of the discussion there.
And they also said, and the developers also said, okay, your character has a PC anchor, but also an NPC anchor. So now you have to choose, okay, who do I choose? And now, as a player, I have to ask, okay, why? Because I chose the one-eyed mechanic guy, and I chose him, Peter, because I had my guy be like a handyman, do it himself, because he was single all of his life. He coached Little League and school, so he had to do a lot of his own do it yourself around the house, plumbing and stuff like that. And Peter is a plumber, so they bonded over that. And I said, like, or I'm thinking in my backstory, like, he got along with Peter a lot because he kind of learned from Peter on like how to do plumbing, how to rewire stuff, how to be a better plumber and mechanic. And then once everything got went to crap, then when we were on the road, he looked to Peter as the fixer in case any cars broke down or we had a problem with plumbing on the big on the big car, the big ambibus that we were trotting around, and they just bonded over that. And now, whenever he has to go anywhere with an NPC, he's like, I want to take Peter. I can trust him.
Well, and that concept of the game mechanics, the game system forcing you to pick an NPC anchor is exactly what I was about to mention and then told you to go ahead. So I'm glad I told you to go ahead.
Yay!
Great minds.
Great minds think
Great
alike.
minds.
Yeah, because I really like that
Just
because
stay out of my mind. It's not a great mind.
it is a frightening place in there.
Mhm.
I don't go there.
Don't go there.
Lucky you. That's a strength of that particular system, but it's also a way that particular system draws from the source material. Because you have, again, in both the Walking Dead comic and the TV show, and the TV show is more what the RPG is based on, you have your opening credits named regular cast, and then you have a bunch of supporting characters surrounding them. You have your companion NPCs who surround them and complement them, and this being Walking Dead, either the NPCs or the PCs can end up becoming Walker Chow.
And
Yep.
it's easy to find out if they're included in the previously on The Walking Dead.
If they're included in the previously on The Walking Dead, and or they suddenly get a big moment where you learn a lot about their backstory,
Or both.
they're about to die.
Yep, they're about to get the arrow through their eye and just.
Yes, they're about to be Denised.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. That she
Goes
out on a mission and tells us her backstory and gets a crossbow bolt through the eye.
And prominently focused was given focus was like, oh yeah, see, it's a character. Wait, oh no, she's doomed.
Yep, it's when like, that flag's looking mighty red.
I'm not going to say that I'm planning on doing this, but I have been kind of consciously giving everybody a little bit of plot armor since Nick's first PC died in session 0,
and his other one is now in prison.
And it occurs to me that on Fear the Walking Dead, that character's name was Nick. Coincidentally, Nick had some plot armor on him.
He did.
And then all of a sudden, they ripped his plot armor off and killed him.
Oh, that honestly, he was not just because I said the same name, but like they did him dirty.
all of a sudden, the plot armor came off. So
and it just was like, okay, you are in the main cast, and then the next episode was like, about that.
Yeah, and I think actually the Telltale Walking games, at least season 2, also had a Nick, but he was the opposite of, oh, I just want this guy to die.
Well, that's it. Honestly, that's also something we talk about. NPCs that are made to be disliked, and there's plenty of we have plenty to talk about NPCs.
Yeah, and I think that category definitely ties into when we talked about making a memorable villain, those that you characters love to hate.
Yeah, I think that goes over in that episode, and we're holding off on doing that one because that one's going to be a good one, and we don't want to just throw it right out of the gate in our first few months of being on.
Because there's plenty to talk about if NPCs, as they are like, as I sort of mentioned earlier, they're just as important as like understanding the mechanics of your world and system that you're running. They help they're the population of the world.
Yeah, the NPCs give it flavor and give the world life. Just like in real life, there's going to be people that you pass on the street or encounter out and about at a store or whatever that you're like, yeah, whatever.
But in your back of your mind, you're like, oh, they're dressed like that, so this is like a fancy part of town, or they're dressed in. There's a different demographic there that's a sort of like where they like to hang out.
And then on the flip side, there is the NPC that you run into out and about. You run into someone else who is a fellow player at Gamer Nation Con, and you're like, I like this person. You run into a Brev or a Darren or a Steve, and like
sometimes you see a guy with
Definitely
an
a
exclamation
Steve.
point over their head, and they have a quest for you. Then you need to beat up a whole bunch of rats in the back alley for XP. Or that's MMORPGs.
Yes, that's different kinds of RPGs, Nick.
Or there's the person that after you've talked to them, they might have some work for me, or they might be someone good to know. Like maybe they're good at dealing information, and if you need something, you can go get to them for it. Or if they know people, maybe they can find you someone who can sell you or get you that object you're trying to seek. Just like form connections throughout.
And we've kind of touched on it. You have your narrative NPCs and your actual companion NPCs. You want both of them to be as engaging as they're meant to be, because some of them aren't meant to be very engaging.
Yep.
But for like your narrative NPCs, like your job giver
If
and
they
your
are
fixer and all of that,
instead of statting them out, you want them to have that
you
flavor.
want them to have a personality, you want them to have a flavor, but you don't want to give them numbers, because what's the first rule about giving a character stats?
If it's statted, you can kill it.
Yep, if it's statted, you can kill it.
And if they're just meant for flavor, I mean, you might end up wanting to kill that character off later on for dramatic sake.
But guess what? The players don't know that they don't know what numbers are behind that DM screen.
Now, the problem comes where, if you're running that fixer and one of the PCs isn't getting along with the fixer and decides that they want to fight him. Now, you have to come up with either a reason why the fight doesn't happen or make up numbers on the fly.
Yeah, either make up numbers or say, okay, you kill the fixer you've been working with. Cool. A lot more fixers are probably not going to talk to you anymore because you basically killed one.
It's kind of,
or bodyguards come in, or
bodyguards
what have
come
you.
in.
Bodyguards come in before the fight even starts and like, out of here.
Yep.
Or the whole smoke bomb.
Smoke bomb, always a classic.
Pocket save.
Yeah.
Now, you pull the Batman with the smoke bomb, but canonically, Batman keeps lollipops in his utility belt in case he comes across a scared kid, and canonically, he kept them in the pouch next to the smoke bombs, and Superman was very concerned about that. He was like, I don't know what troubles me more, that you might actually accidentally give a kid a smoke bomb, or that you might throw a lollipop on the ground thinking you're going to disappear when fighting the Joker.
Well, honestly, if he in that specific situation, I think that would distract the Joker enough for him to disappear.
Or it'd be funny enough that he'd laugh himself into a detraction.
This is canon. It occurred in an issue of Nightwing.
Of course, it's a Nightwing issue.
It was a Tom Taylor Nightwing issue.
Yep, classic. But yeah, I think we've touched on it, but this is part of, like, maybe not a part one, but it's like the discussion of NPCs is probably something we're going to be talking about for a long time in this series.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about with adversary NPCs.
Yeah, and
it's a good start to be like at least conceptualizing concepts, because again, these are, and we probably could revisit this in the future, especially if viewers have like specific questions or comments
feedback or
Yep.
Wait,
My
Nick, are you trying to give me a segue? But Robert has more stuff to say, so we can't segue yet.
I just
Oh,
have a
no.
final. I just have a final thought for those aspiring DM and GMs out there.
Hit us.
If you want to know if you want a good baseline or something to research on how to make a good NPC companion, heck, just pick up a story at your local bookstore, read through it, see, okay, this is the main character, now who's surrounding the main character, and then ask yourself, just you as a person reading this story, okay, which characters do I like, which companions do I not like, and why? What about them gains my attention, my admiration, or which ones kind of repel me? And you can kind of use that as just a simple personal baseline to see, okay, now that I'm making my own story with my own players and we're all in this,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
NPCs could I make?
Like my
But-
favorite sidekick of in fantasy is Frodo Baggins to the real main character, Samwise Gamgee.
yeah, just a book, movies, TV, comics, wherever. There are quote unquote NPCs in every work of fiction out there. And I rattled off some in the intro. If you're reading, watching, listening, what have you, think about those supporting characters. What makes you like that supporting character and want to see them come back some more?
And recognizes what helps them contrast and compare with the quote unquote main character.
Exactly.
Right. I was mentioning Stuart a lot because Stuart's a great example
Yeah.
because they tried to make him a PC and he wasn't designed to be a PC
In the
for
story that they had.
for the campaign that was the Big Bang Theory. Stuart made a contrast because by the time they started coming back to Stuart after just one or two one-off appearances where he was just generic comic store guy, the main characters were starting to be, they were still quote unquote nerds. They were still stereotypical nerds. They still were not fully socially well adjusted, for want of a better term.
Like
They,
us.
right. Exactly like us. And take the way that we phrase that how you wish, dear listener. But Stuart, by contrast, the main characters were becoming more successful, for want of a better term. Leonard and Penny were finally dating. Not too long after that, they introduced Bernadette as a love interest for Howard.
Yeah.
Sheldon had a girlfriend, for God's sake.
And that's saying something.
And
Poor
so-
Rashid.
So Stuart, what was more a reflection of what they had been. Stuart was the sad sack. Stuart, had trouble finding a girlfriend. Stuart was spent every waking hour in his comic store and for a time lived in the back because he lost his apartment.
But that's still a contrasting character that
Exactly.
helps make a point to the character. So again, always think like going back to like the classic Shakespeare quote, "All the world's a stage," and we're all at least some of us are like the background guy of someone else's story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And there's nothing wrong with a little comic relief.
Yeah,
Have your cabbage merchant in the avatar.
obviously.
and some of us aren't just the background characters in some people. Some of us are the villains in some people's stories. Let's be real.
Some of us are the protagonists and the villains of their own stories.
Antagonist and villain are not synonyms, Nick.
That's true.
Protagonist and hero are not synonyms.
That could be another episode.
And
Making an antagonist, not a villain.
Or
Rivals.
that could fall under that same umbrella. We'll have to flesh that one out more when we get
I'll
to
think
it.
about it. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mentioned Friends early on.
Mhm.
So Janice was a recurring character. I don't think Janice made more than 12 appearances over the course of the 10 seasons. She's a memorable, recurring,
Aspect,
supporting character. because that character stood out because she was a contrast to the friends.
Yeah.
The moment you heard, "Oh my God,"
You knew things were going on.
yeah. So
Yeah, it looks like she was in 19 episodes, like physically.
But-
I lowballed it, but still 19 out of 10 seasons out of 200 and something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And still, like, even with your I could still hear it in my head. That voice is like, whenever I did a rewatch a couple years ago, it's like the minute I was like, oh, this is an episode that's going to be, she's going to cause some trouble in.
What? Janice caused trouble? Nah. But yeah, just you can find that kind of inspiration for those different dynamics between
For fiction.
between the NPCs and your PCs everywhere. And they're not all going to land.
And again, that's why I say, like, usually if they adopt a sidekick or find an NPC they like, it's usually a group decision. And that's usually not something you can force.
Yeah.
Definitely do not force it.
It's
Honestly,
all organic.
If you force it, that's how they're gonna throw that NPC in the trash.
If you force it, you're going into that bad DMPC territory.
Those successful
You'll never know when
NPCs
it hits, but when you see it hit, roll with it. Embrace the bit. If they like, if it's a
Hey.
Oh.
Are you segueing us, Nick?
Nick is Nick's going to go a segue. We're not going to pick on Nick.
No.
Because Nick gave us such a good segue.
You are clear this time, Nick.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, we did kind of throw him under the bus earlier.
I live another day.
But I think we've hit everything we wanted to say about companion NPCs. So we're not going to pick on Nick. We're just going to jump straight to the part where I say, check out our website at howwerollgaming.com, and there you'll find links to all of our socials and information about our current campaigns.
Yep, and you can also directly support the show through Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/howwerollgaming, and you'll see our different membership tiers starting at just $2 a month, with special recognition on our Discord server, and higher tiers giving you on-air credit and discounts on our new merch store.
Our new merch store, woo! Speaking of our new merch store, as we record this on June 3rd, 2025, we just launched the new merch store 3 days ago on June 1st. So head on over to merch.howwerollgaming.com, and during the month of June 2025, you can take 15% off your total order with the promo code REROLL, or take 20% off of our Roll with Pride collection, including some limited edition items.
Finally, if you have any questions you'd like us to answer, topics you'd like us to cover, or even submit your own RPG glory story, shoot us an email at podcast@howwerollgaming.com.
Woo! And that will wrap it up for this episode. We will see everyone next time. And while we're doing all of those plugs, if you happen to be watching or listening to the podcast on our YouTube channel, please do us a favor and do the whole stereotypical YouTube stuff, like and subscribe and let the whole thing play in the background.
Don't forget the bell.
Because we have to feed the algorithm.
So it can feed us.
It's hungry. The algorithm's hungry.
Feed the algorithm. But until that next time we come around, as always, I'm Daryl.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Robert.
And this is How We Roll.